time we call the New Kingdom. It left us the greatest treasures of the ancient world, an extraordinary legacy in papyrus, stone, and gold. But behind these treasures lies an epic tale of real people. People like Ramesses the Great, Tutankhamun, the Boy King, and one of the most beautiful and powerful women of the ancient world, Queen Nefertiti. It is a story brought to life by their own words and those of the ordinary men and women who would change the course of history. In eyewitness accounts, soldiers describe the birth of an empire forged on the battlefield. Pharaohs record how they created their own legends and became the richest rulers in the world. And ancient craftsmen reveal how they turned Egypt's unimaginable wealth into tombs, temples, and treasure. And how in the end, they would be forced to destroy the very tombs they had built. This is the story of the rise and fall of Egypt's Golden Empire. Over 1,000 years after the pyramids were built, the greatest chapter in Egypt's history was just beginning. The New Kingdom, an explosion of creativity, wealth, and power. It would be the envy of civilizations to come. The Greeks, the Romans, Napoleon, all would look for inspiration to the men and women who built the first empire in recorded history. Yet the Golden Age might never have happened. In 1560 BC, Egypt was in crisis. For the first time in history, the kingdom of the ancient pyramid builders was now occupied and divided. Egypt was on the verge of extinction. In the north, a foreign king had invaded and declared himself Pharaoh. His people, the Hyksos, now occupied the rich Nile Delta. To the south, the warlike Nubians threatened the last remnants of Egypt.
The invasion of the Hyksos to Egypt was really a shock, a surprise, because this is the first time that Egypt was completely invaded. This is the first time that a strange people entered in Egypt and lived for 150 years.
The Egyptian royal line and its city, Thebes, had fallen on hard times. But one local family was determined to revive Egypt's former glory. The king of Thebes and his two sons, the young princes, Khamos and his brother Akhmos. The fate not only of their capital Thebes, but Egypt itself, lay in their hands.
Essentially, it was a time of great trial for the traditional ruling family of Egypt. And the Thebans are really just pawns in this between these two superpowers. They are not the superpower. So really, Ahmosa and Kamosa had become minor princes. And there was a feeling that Egypt, as it had been known for the past 1,500 years, could cease to exist.
Khamos and Akhmos's hatred of the Hyksos was personal. Their father tried to rebel against the invaders in the north. He paid a terrible price. 3,500 years later, his corpse still bears witness to his brutal slaughter at the hands of the enemy.
The face is grisly, partly because it wasn't well preserved, and there are many, many axe marks all over the head. It must have been a Hyksos struggle, and it must have been fairly bloody.
Traditionally, Egyptians viewed foreigners as primitive and barbaric. For young Kamos, the death of his father at the hands of the Hyksos must have been humiliating as well as tragic.
In the ideology of the Egyptians, the foreigner is the inherent enemy, the inherent inferior, over whom the Egyptians have been given divine power by the deities.
They are described as that vile foe, people who are beyond the pale. Foreigners are dirt under the feet of the Pharaoh.
Images of foreigners were carved on footstools like this, so Egyptians could show their superiority by literally trampling on them. Nubians, Libyans, Asiatics were depicted as ugly, as savages, not worthy of placing a foot on Egyptian sand. But now northern Egypt, and even the pyramids, stood on land governed by foreigners.
This was the worst thing to the mind of the Egyptian. The pyramid to Ahmos, to Amosi and Kamos was a kind of a reminder. Tell them we need the glory of Egypt to come back. And this gave them the power to unite, to defeat those strange people and dismiss them away from Egypt.
With his father dead, his land divided, Kamos was determined to defeat the Hyksos. His actual words have survived, carved on this large stone, a stela. Kamos bluntly states his intention to destroy the enemies to the north and south of Egypt.
What power can I claim to have when I'm stuck between an Asiatic and a Nubian? Each of them has a piece of Egypt too, and shares the land with me. My aim is to liberate Egypt and crush the Asiatics.
But Kamos could not fight alone. He had to get his people behind him first. And as the stela records, most Thebans did not object to living in a divided Egypt.
We're satisfied with our share of Egypt. The best fields are ours to cultivate. Grain is still being sent to our swine, and our herds have never been seized.
Not everyone would have been upset with the Hyksos rule. I'm sure times were good for lots of Egyptians under the Hyksos rulers. What then would rally the forces? What would get people going?
The Hyksos soon gave the people of Egypt good reason to be alarmed. On a remote desert road, far from Thebes, Hyksos messengers raced south on a secret mission.
Hyksos messengers were carrying this letter, which must have been rolled up piece of papyrus with a mud seal on it. And they were going through the desert probably at high speeds. And Kamos's spies must have intercepted these messengers.
Kamos's men had captured a messenger from the Hyksos king. The letter he was carrying was addressed to Egypt's other enemy, the king of Nubia. It was an invitation to unite and conquer what was left of Egypt.
Come north. There is no need to worry. Kamose is busy with me here. We'll divide the towns of Egypt between us, and Nubia will rejoice.
The Hyksos were inviting the Nubians to join them in a plot to converge on Egypt and destroy Kamos.
We can think perhaps of the United States. It would really be as if Canada and Mexico were pressing against the U.S. and actually managing or talking about invading.
Kamos knew it was time to fight.
The Hyksos were certainly not backward people. They come from the area of the Levant where the towns are fortified towns, where the weapons of war are, if anything, more advanced than the weapons of the Egyptians. These are fighting people.
Acmos, still only a young boy, watched from the sidelines as his brother Kamos prepared his army for the fight.
Kamose and his brother Ahmose would become the liberators, the freedom fighters. They would become the initiators of the greatest period of Egyptian history.
20-year-old Kamos set off leading his troops north into Hyksos territory.
My mighty army went before me like a blast of fire.
Kamos and his army soon came across a fortified Hyksos town. Kamos was now face to face with his foe.
When the next day dawned, I swooped down on him like a falcon. By breakfast time, I had already defeated him. I demolished his defenses, killed his men.
Kamos recorded the capture of the town with unconcealed delight.
My soldiers were like lions after the kill, as they carried off cattle and slaves, wine, fat and honey, gleefully dividing the loot.
The Egyptian army now headed towards their ultimate goal, Avaris, the Hyksos capital. Kamos felt confident that victory was in his grasp.
He taunts the king of the Hyksos and shouts to him he's a coward, that he's no good, that he's going to vanquish him.
But Kamos would not sack Avaris. The records do not say what happened to him. But on the verge of expelling the Hyksos from Egypt, Kamos died. Egypt's hopes now rested on the shoulders of his 10-year-old brother, Acmos. Although his mother had lost both her husband and eldest son to the Hyksos, she now groomed Acmos to continue the war of liberation they had begun.
Ahmose would have been learning the ways of battle, and his mother and courtiers would have been training him to become a great military leader, and he had the example of Kamose to follow. So he's got to get it right. Not only for his own case, but because the nation depends on it.
After 10 years of preparation, Acmos was ready to take on the Hyksos. It would be his greatest test. The consequences would determine the rest of Egyptian history. Only one eyewitness account remains.